Everybody. Again, my name is April and I am with Friends of the Rappahannock. I'm really excited that you are joining me today to learn a little bit more about birds and read a really awesome bird story. Just to get you all started, there is a prize for the first 10 people to ask questions. So you would notice in your video that there is a Q&A section. So you can use that section to ask questions as we go. And the first 10 people get these decals, these window clings for your windows. So that's really nice. All right. Well, I love birds. I take a life list and I very much enjoy just watching the birds and seeing who comes around, but I also like to count them and report that data using a couple of tools, which we'll talk about more later. But just to get us started, we're going to be referencing a couple of tools, and I'll show you them again. I'm going to be referencing one is eBird, which is a free app that you can use on your phone from Cornell Bird Lab. And another is another product of Cornell is the Merlin ID. So just some tools that we'll discuss a little bit later. I have one of my favorite books, Counting Birds. I'm gonna have to learn to be a little bit taller. So Counting Birds, and we're gonna talk a little bit about why it's so important for all of us to get engaged and count birds, partially because they are enjoyable. So we're going to just dive in to this story. I'm actually going to skip a couple of pages because it's a little bit more about history. So I'm going to summarize that for you all. So if you aren't familiar, birds have been loved for hundreds of years. Hundreds of years. We got our first question. Woo. And we have shown humans all across the world have shown our love for birds in different ways, some ways which weren't so great. Way back when, we used to get birds and put whole birds on top of hats, right? They were common fashion items. And for sport, we used to all across the world, humans would just hunt birds just for the sake of saying, oh, I caught this bird, now I'm going to taxidermy it, I'm going to have a collection in my home. And scientifically speaking, we just did not have a great understanding of what that could do to overall populations of birds, right? So we didn't really quite have an understanding of what could cause a bird to be endangered or an animal to be endangered or extinct. So we learned a lot, and a lot of good people along the way helped us to learn these things. And as Maya Angelou, one of my favorite writers, have said, you do the best you can with what you know, but once you know better, do better. So this is a story about someone who was like, I think we know better, let's do better. And to answer, Cynthia has asked us our first question, what is the most common bird in America? That's such a good question. I don't know, this is anecdotal because I have not done the research to say what is the most commonly seen bird across the United States. And this anecdotal, right? This is something I probably should research later and get back to you. Red-tailed hawks can be found, and bald eagles are two species of bird that can be found across the entire United States, into North America, all throughout North America. So those are two very, very common types of birds. Yeah, that's what I'm going for off the top of my head. Honestly, we could talk about invasive species a little bit. So one of the most common birds is probably the European starling that was brought over from Europe. They're pretty abundant across North America too. Okay, are y'all ready to put a 1 in the chat if you're super ready to get started with counting birds? I like enthusiasm. Yeah! Yay for the ones. Thank y'all. Okay, so the person's name that we're starting this story with is Frank Chapman. And so he loved birds so much that he started a bird magazine. And this was back in the late 1800s. So Frank Chapman did not love this tradition of hunting birds. In the pages of his magazine, he set out to stop it. Now, bird lore proposes a new kind of Christmas hunt in the form of a Christmas bird census. And we hope that all of our readers who have the opportunity will aid us in making it a success by spending a portion of Christmas Day with the birds and sending a report of their, quote, hunt to bird lore before they retire that night. Count them, he proposed, but don't kill them. So let's give a hand to Frank Chapman for changing tradition. Love that. All right. That first year on Christmas Day, 1900, 27 bird watchers in 25 locations from Connecticut to California counted common loons and killdeer, winter wrens, and red-winged blackbirds. So all across different habitats, from the mountains to the fields and the forests to the sea, right? Counted birds. They observed hermit thrushes, barred owls, Carolina chickadees, fish crows, turkey vultures, spotted and canyon towhees. In all, bird lore proudly reported close to 18,500 birds from 89 different species. Not one bird was killed. So just with this fun art here, I got a question. What do you think is the best known bird? Oh my goodness. I think one of the best known birds is a bluebird. There are different bluebird species across North America. Another very common bird would be the chickadee. I don't know hardly anybody who doesn't know what a chickadee is. And there are a number of species across North America for chickadees as well. So those are some that I do agree. What is the best known bird in North America? Probably the bald eagle, right? We love our bald eagles. Right. That first count was not the last. Every year in December, more people join the count. Every year, more areas are added, and every year, more and more birds are counted in every corner of the United States, as well as Canada, Mexico, and Colombia. Other counts happen all over the world. And I will note, we're going to talk more about different types of citizen science, but Colombia is like the reigning champion for number of species on a count. All right. The owlers are the first ones into the field. They climb out of their warm beds at midnight and call down owls in the dark. By the light of the moon, they raise their hands to their mouths and whistle. They use recordings of real owls to hoot. They wait and listen. When an owl calls back, the owlers mark their maps and move on to the next spot. When the sun starts to rise, so do fresh birders who arrive to take over. Some owlers say good night, and some keep counting. All day long, groups observe and take notes in their count circles. Sandwich terns and song sparrows, creepers, thrashers, bufflehead, brant, and bobwhites. All birds are welcome. Not all bird watchers are in the field. Some count the birds that visit their backyard feeders. All birders are welcome. At the end of the day, the birders collect their notes and add their numbers. Later, the National Audubon Society will compile all the data and learn many things: how climate change affects bird populations, which species are in trouble, and what areas need some conservation help. The birders know this is important for science, but that night, what is really important are their stories. Who found the most owls? Which rare birds are spotted? What records were broken? The Audubon Christmas bird count has become the longest running citizen science project and wildlife census in the world. Everyone wins. The birds, the birders, science. And all this because Frank Chapman loved birds. So, that is such a rewarding story for me because counting birds is really important, and it doesn't just have to be on Christmas. The Audubon Society does always recruit volunteers for going out and doing a Christmas bird count, which is large, usually spans many regions, and all levels are welcome to come. There's usually a group leader for those. There's also early in the year, oh my gosh, this weekend, great backyard bird count, which is what I'm hoping to encourage you all to try to participate in. We have today and tomorrow, and all it takes is 15 minutes of looking out your window and counting birds. So I'm hoping to give you a handful of tips and tricks and a little bit of knowledge to help you do that report. You can also keep an eye out. Cornell hosts Project Feeder Watch, which goes through March. That's something you can register for, and then they'll send you lots of information to help you keep track of all the birds that come to your backyard. And there's also the Global Big Day, which is in May, to keep track of birds during spring migration. So lots of opportunities for all of us to contribute to science. I will make one note. I'm going to play us some sounds a little later. Although these folks recommend calling in owls, we want to make sure we don't abuse that power because sometimes that can distract them. So I would say wait until you're with someone who's maybe been birding a little bit more than you, if you're new to it, to kind of help you learn when it's appropriate to use callbacks or playbacks or not. We have a couple of questions, which is great. What is your favorite bird and why? Oh my gosh. It changes periodically. I think my current favorite bird is the Manx shearwater. I'll find a picture of it for you. It's the Manx shearwater. I went on my first pelagic boat tour to go look. Actually, I take that back. It's the northern gannet, which is in the booby family, which, let's all chuckle. So there's a northern gannet, but I went on a boat tour and I got to see these really, really close. They're related to those blue-footed boobies that are so popular and do their little fun foot dance, right? So that's currently my favorite bird, and it's just because they are glossy looking and really, really cool. I have another question from Abby. How do you accurately count birds when they are flying around and moving? Oh, that is such a great point. We're going to talk about that in just a little bit. I wanted to get us started with a couple more basics first. Thank you for those questions. So first of all, can you put a 1 in the chat if you have binoculars and a 0 in the chat if you do not have binoculars? Awesome. Very helpful. A lot of folks with binoculars. So really exciting. The library actually has a book bag that you can check out, one for adults and one for little ones, that have lots of field guides, a pair of binoculars to help you get started learning about birds. If you rarely use your binoculars, or if you're just not familiar and know what parts are doing what, I'm going to do a little bit of a binocular tutorial for everyone because they really do help you make sure you're identifying birds properly. So if you look right here, you can see 12 times 25. So if you're looking into getting binoculars, consider what type of magnification you want. The 12 is that magnifying power, and that 25 is the diameter, or how big the view you're going to look through is. So a bigger view is going to let more light into binoculars so that if you're using them on a cloudy day, you can still see them a little bit more. And then, of course, the 12 is how powerful they are. So I have a couple of examples here with me. So right, the ones that are in the backpack are a 12 times 25. I have a pair that I use in my programs with friends at the Rappahannock that are 8 times 25. Those are usually a little bit easier for the youngest of kids, because the more powerful the magnification is, the more precise you have to be about bringing your binoculars to your eyes and actually still seeing what you're looking at. So for my littlest little kids, I use the 8 times 25s. And then as you grow up and you get really good, I have some 10 times 42s because I want to make sure I see everything in the bright light. Other little parts of binoculars, if you're not familiar, most of them can kind of come in, come out, and adjust. Some might have a flap versus a twist. And if you're wearing glasses, you want to push those in or pull the flat back. But if you're not wearing glasses, you want to pull them out. And then most are going to have an adjustment on one of the lenses for astigmatism. And then all your fine focus is going to be that one right there. So just a little binocular review. Especially with little ones, I would take time choosing like a flagpole or something in a yard that's really obvious so you can practice the bringing them to your eyes and spotting. That's going to really help you make sure you get on the bird quick, and then you don't lose it in the time it's taking you to try to figure out, binoculars up, binoculars down. Another part of identification is making sure you have the appropriate tools to identify a new bird to you. Can you go ahead and put in the chat what you might commonly use or what you think you would use to find, wow, what a bird is? What tools are you using? Anyone have a favorite field guide or a website? All right, yeah, picture books, ID books, eBird. All right, several field guides, BirdNet. Good, so a lot of you are very familiar with your types of ID books. Again, I'm kind of focused on how we're going to get kiddos involved. Pictures really do best for kiddos. So we have, I think, one of the cheapest and easiest routes. These are found in that book bag that the library has available for you to check out. But these are probably one of the most cost-effective ways to get some of the most common birds in your area. So Virginia birds, right? But that's going to have birds that are going to be backyard birds, as well as birds that you maybe aren't going to find in your backyard unless you live at the beach. And then in that case, lucky you. However, there is a Sibley's backyard birds for the Mid-Atlantic, so that's where we are. And that's going to give you pictures and some size and descriptions. Another really key thing for identifying birds is to take note of seasonality. So this at least still has some indicators of when you might see this bird year round. So we have, for example, our Baltimore Oriole, which can totally come to your backyard if you have the right feed, usually oranges or something sweet like jelly. But we're really going to see them spring and summer. Those are going to be our main times to see them. If you see them in winter, not saying you're lying, but it would be more odd. For kids, I also really like, and you can get this at Wild Birds Unlimited, Birds of Virginia. And what I like about this guide is that it's color coded. So you can go by what color you see on the bird and immediately go there and start flipping through. So I think that's really nice for kiddos. I'm going to say, put a 1 in the chat if you have a kiddo with you today, or if you're watching on your own. So put a 1 if you have a kiddo with you. Hey! All right, we got a handful of kiddos. Since we're talking about colors, I have a scavenger hunt for you all. Can you can help with your kiddo, send those kiddos on a rainbow scavenger hunt. Get one item for each of the colors of the rainbow. Roy G. Bivas, okay? Red, orange, yellow, blue, indigo, violet. Oh my gosh, that was a brain fart. Yes. So go, I'm going to give you 90 seconds. 90 seconds. And then you can just put in the chat. Let me know when you come back with all your colors. Ready and go. Okay. All right. While our kiddos are on a scavenger hunt for colors, I would like to remind you that if you ask that question today, please call the Warrenton Library Children's Department to make arrangements to pick up your window clings. So I have all those people in the chat, but if you were one of the first 10, you know who you are. So go ahead and call the Warrenton Library to arrange that pickup. The number is 540-422-8500, extension 3. All right. So I think I'm going to give you about 30 more seconds. And then, awesome, some people are reporting back. We got them. We got our scavenger hunt items. All right. Tell me what you put in for red. What do you have? Just go ahead and put in the chat. We see what you have. You can even put, like, describe it to me if it's not something obvious. What type of red is it? We have Legos, so maybe some shapes. Do you have different shades? Flashlight, water bottle for red. Checkered hat. All right, so we're adding some patterns in there. Awesome. So I'm going to go ahead and flip to my red section of my book, I think we're going to flip to my red section of my book. Well, this one seems to go straight to, okay. So can anyone guess what red bird I've probably flipped to? I want kiddos to answer. Yee! Okay, cool. Cardinal, you nailed it. All right, so probably one of the most identifiable birds that people know best, especially in this region, is our northern cardinal. So I like, again, with this one, you can flip to colors and then search through. But notice, right, let's not forget that a lady cardinal isn't bright red. So I really like that some of you all put oh, checkered, or describe some of the shades for me, because that's also really important when identifying birds, right? Because we might say, well, it's red, but it has that mask, right? This one has a black mask. And we might even notice, oh, that bill is really reddish orange too. And it looks like it can crack some seeds. So that's going to help us identify exactly what it is, because, and let's not forget the mohawk, right? You know, a summer bird that we get that is also red, that likes insects more than it likes coming to feeders, is this summer tanager. And it's all red too, but we can know, all right, well, we know it's not a cardinal because it doesn't have that red mask and it doesn't have that mohawk. All right, give me your orange. What orange item did you get? What do you want to describe about that orange item to help me know exactly what it is and identify it? Ooh, a carrot. Okay. Play away tablet. All right. So the orange bird that I'm going to choose to show, maybe if it'll let me, is there aren't as many completely orange birds, but there's that Baltimore Oriole again. So mostly orange, but we would notice all the black cap. We would notice that its back is black. We would say, oh, it has white wing bars, right? So we would take note of, okay, primary colors, black and orange, and then we would note any other markings. And we might even know, oh, look at that. It has a pointy black bill. All right, give me yellow. What did you find for yellow items? Ooh, a lion. More Legos. Okay. Balloon pump. All right. So a banana. Um, so that's my yellow bird that I chose. Or goldfinch, exactly. So another common one that's going to come to feeders. It might be, I think I have this covered up. Winter male, right? A little bit more drab, and then they get extra pretty in the summer. But we're going to take note of like, okay, let's make sure in the summer it has that black patch, kind of a conical bill, kind of pointy, where it's wing bars, right? So we're going to take note of these things. Now, y'all tell me, based on your items, is your yellow item smaller or larger than your red item? That's a great tool, because one of the things that we're going to want to pay attention to as we learn birds is choosing some birds that we know really, really well. Like, I think we all knew Cardinal right away. So we would be able to say, just by looking at this goldfinch, and even if we didn't know what it was, we could at least start by saying, well, it is definitely smaller than a Cardinal, to help us get to what size we're looking for, because there are other yellow birds that we might confuse it with. All right, let's just finish it up. What about blue? Tell me your blue item. A blue mouse, a stuffed owl, a speaker, more Legos. I love all the Legos. Can someone build a bird for Legos and then like send it to the library? Please do that for me. So I chose another pretty iconic bird. I think most of us know about this bird. It's a blue jay. Um, Hard to confuse the blue jay with anybody else, but we can notice, all right, it has a really long beak. It has different shades of blue. And this is a really good one to use Lego bird build. Yes. This one's a really good for that size comparison as well. Is it bigger or smaller than a blue jay? Is it bigger or smaller than a crow? Again, that's going to help you narrow down what your bird might be. Gosh, are there any purple birds? What do y'all think? Tell me what your purple. We're gonna skip to purple or indigo or violet, and we're gonna see if I have a purple bird in here. Purple bracelet. All right, is your purple bracelet shiny? That makes a difference to me. Yeah. Starlings are kind of purple. You're right. I can show you a starling. They're so iridescent. They have lots of shades. I was actually trying to see if there was a purple gallinule or something in here, which would be kind of like a swamp bird. Um, but here we do have that starling, which has all sorts of shades. We even got our green and a little bit of purple right there. So you can usually tell a starling because they're with a lot of people. Often, not a lot of people. There are a lot of starlings. Sorry. So they're going to be hanging out in really large flocks. They make these kind of high pitched musical sounds. And they're practically everywhere. I saw the question come in, do starlings cause a lot of house damage? I don't know if I would say a lot. I think they will nest almost anywhere. So if there is a crack or crevice in your home, they could absolutely try to build a nest in there. I know I've definitely had some in my gutters previously. So, but that wasn't necessarily damaged, just more like, okay, well, I got to get the birds out of my gutters. So yeah, there's that question. So that is kind of right. We're just kind of getting used to matching colors. Another thing, looking at range maps, that's always going to help you make sure you're identifying your birds appropriately based on the time of year. So, right, this one is also completely full. This cute little black and white warbler, not maybe as likely to come to a feeder, but it's green, saying it's only here during the summer. So we want to take a look at like all the different sizes that a bird may be, and then all the different patterns. So one of my recommendations, especially once you get really good and precise at lifting up your binoculars, or maybe it's something you can see out your window, is before you run to a book, like a field guide, or the internet, whatever you're using. I personally love the All About Birds website. So yes, I can show you the name of the guides again. Absolutely. Stare at it. Mentally say, okay, it has eyebrow markings. Okay, it has dots on its belly. Really take note of the size of its beak, the color of its legs, for as long as you can see it, because by the time you go grab your book or pull up your web browser, that bird might not be there anymore. So you definitely want to make sure you're getting as good a look as possible and then referencing an ID. So Birds of Virginia is one I know you can find in Wild Birds Unlimited. We have Sibley's Backyard Birds, and then the Pocket Naturalist Guide, Virginia Birds. I at home have a National Geographic bird ID book. I really like that one because it'll have tabs that's like that you can go to, which is like hawks, finches, cardinals, blackbirds, and you can really easily go there. You can see I love this book a lot, right? I mean, it is lived. It is probably my favorite bird ID guide because of how it has a comparison page for each group of birds, right? So you can see them all next to each other, which I think is really helpful. And then it shows you flight patterns, and you know, you have your map as usual, and then has little notations about what field markings or things to look for. So that is, I really like the Sibley's guide a lot. But it's all about like what you're getting used to and if your kiddos are getting into it. Because I like to start with all the basic ones and know those by the back of my hand first. Okay, I have a couple questions. Oh, one question we're coming back to. How do you accurately count birds when they are flying and moving around? So one of the things that you're going to want to do, actually, let's start with put a 1 in the chat so I can identify how many of you you're going to be a backyard birder. You're like, I'm going to look out my window or my back porch, and we're mostly going to stay stationary and let the birds come to us. Yeah? Okay. 1, that makes life easier right there. So if you have your feeder up, what you're going to do as you're watching, right? You might even have, you might take the time to practice identifying and be like, oh, I know I have cardinals at my feeder. And you write that down. So you're like, done. Cardinals are going to show up. Maybe you know that one of the things I did want to show you is one of the most common woodpeckers that if you went and picked up your bird feeder from the library already, that is really ideal for woodpeckers and nuthatches. So one of the most common backyard feeder woodpeckers is our Downy Woodpecker right there. You can see it clinging. And again, I just love all these different views. So that's going to be one of your popular birds. If you know that's coming to your yard, write all those down, and then you can just tally mark as you go. And what you want to do in the space that you're looking, you only count the number of birds that you see that's like the total, right? So if a chickadee, a single chickadee, comes and lands on your feeder and then goes away, that's one. And then if a chickadee comes back later in that 15-minute time frame, that's still one, because it could be the same chickadee. But if you get one and then it goes away, and then two come back because it's like, y'all, I found this really cool food source and it brought its friends, now you can count two, right? So you want to check off and say, this is how many I saw, but I saw them all at one time. And the best thing about using eBird is that it is asking you to say, I did my best job, right? So it's asking you, I think I did my best job, and you're not going to get in trouble if you got it wrong. But if you decided, you're like, oh, I think, oh my gosh, can I find this picture? I think, let me find a really fun friend to show you all. Here we go. If you got a little confused and maybe a tanager came to your yard, but you're like, it's this one, it's this one. There's someone who checks all the reports on eBird, and they're probably going to be like, well, that's a Western tanager, and it lives west of the Mississippi. They might flag your posting just to be like, unless you have a picture, we're going to take this posting down, because that's a little suspect. Does that make sense? Yeah. So let's go through what you would do if you were going in your backyard and you wanted to participate in the Great Backyard Bird Count. So it's 15 minutes of your time. And again, you are just tallying, this is what's coming to my yard as best you can, right? However many are in one spot at once versus counting the same chickadee over and over again. So what you'll do, you can do it on a desktop, but I think the app is super easy. So you download the free app, right? And all I would have to do is click mirror imaging, start checklist, right? And it automatically is going to say, you know, a snow goose would be really weird for you to see right here in this library. Not likely. But maybe, what is my next one down? Maybe a Canada goose would fly over. That makes a little bit more sense. So it already kind of filters out and tells you what is likely or unlikely in your area. And let's say nothing comes to your yard. No puffins in Warrenton? Not yet. Not yet. I have not seen. This is the eBird app. Again, I like it. I also like that if you use the eBird app and sign up for their newsletters, they tell you how you could possibly use submitting eBird lists to win a pair of like $1,000 binoculars. I haven't won yet, but I'm waiting for it. So then you can go and you can say, all right, I saw, well, if you don't want to scroll, you can hit the search bar. And I'm going to type in Northern Cardinal because that is pretty common. It'll ask you for the number you saw. You can put any notes, like, right, if you want to say I had 3 females and 2 males, you can put that in there. Scientists will use that data because it's using your GPS. They have access to, and it has the day, they have access to weather data so they can compare who's doing what based on the day of the year and the weather. And what's really cool, you never know, if you notice a bird has been banded, you can put in that band number if you see it, right? So that's when you need your binoculars. It might have a band on its little leg. All right, so I'm just going to pretend I saw 1 Northern Cardinal. I'm done. And then I'm going to hit stop, all right? So I can either keep birding or I'm going to stop my track. And look at that. It can tell, oh, you didn't move anywhere. You did a stationary observation. You birded for 2 minutes You didn't travel. Please confirm your location, right? And if it's your backyard and you're posting it, because this is public access data, I always put in there private property, right? And you can even move it over just slightly, like if you wanted to put it in the road, because it's still the general area. I think what I've read that scientists are looking for is an area that's at least less than a 3 mile radius. Like they don't love data that travels more than 3 miles because that's not a region. But you could even move your dot a little bit away from your house if you're not really thrilled with like your report being public space data from your home. And then again, it has that please check yes or no. If you say no, then they don't want your data. If you're like, I'm not sure about it, but so you could do yes, and then it shows you your summary, and then you hit continue, and then it submits your data for you. And now you have contributed. You are a scientist. You have helped. So that's great. I also encourage not to be afraid of submitting a report with 0 birds, because that's still data. If you have a habitat and no birds are showing up, that is useful. Someone might pull that information to be like, what square, like radius, are there no birds? So that's super helpful. So we can go through one of my favorite bird IDs on the phone is Merlin, which is also free. And you can do it with photos, you can use sounds, and you can just explore what birds are in your region. So you can do start bird ID by location or map and the date. So it tells you the year, and then it goes through and is like, what size would this bird? Remember how I was saying it's really important to say smaller or larger than, right? So what do we think this is? What is this guy? And kiddos, can you make that sound? I want you to drive your guardians and supervisors insane by making a sound of what you think that animal is. All right. And if they don't know, parents, please teach them. Teach them what a goose sound makes. That's important information. All right. Then we have our crow. So y'all tell me, what do we want to pretend we saw? Something the size of a goose, the size of a crow, the size of that looks like an American robin, and then the size of a sparrow. Y'all tell me, where are we going? Goose. Oh, we have some conflicts. Gonna see. All right, I have more robins than I do anything else. So we're gonna go size of a robin. Robin sized. All right. Y'all tell me what color is going to win. Tallying it up. Red. All right, I think red won. So we're going red or Rufus. Next. All right, what was it doing? Eating at a feeder. I kind of say we should just go with eating at a feeder since we're talking about backyard birds. All right. And then it's creating our possible list. How easy is that? Look at that. Our options are northern cardinal. Yep. Ooh, so there's a northern cardinal that's like a baby. Oh, there is a northern cardinal that possibly had a parasite that made it lose its feathers on its head. So really cool tool for helping you identify birds, especially if you have questions. I like to say there's one other tool for identifying birds other than looking at them. What do y'all think that is? Listening. All right, I'm going to ask, what bird calls do any of you think you know? Ask your kids, ask the kiddos, what do they think birds sound like? Oh, we have barred owl as an option, a chickadee, owl, goose. All right, the little cardinal chirps. Absolutely. Ooh, Yes. Oh, chicken sounds. I love chicken sounds. All right. So I'm gonna go with one of the, oh my gosh, I wish I could hear you. Before I start, I want all the kiddos, give your people your best owl sound. Give them your best owl sound. All right. Now, yes, good. I'm so glad. Oh, love it. Now, can you match this hooting sound? All right. So that was our barred owl, and they sound like they say, "Who cooks for you? Who cooks for you?" All. So that's one of my favorite and probably one of the most popular bird sounds you could get. What other? We had a chickadee. All right. So our most common chickadee that we're gonna have around here is the Carolina chickadee. And this is one of my favorite things about birds, when they sing what their name is. So this one sounds a bit like Carolina. And then another sound that the chickadee makes is probably our most common, what we think of when we think of a chickadee the most. Um, And a fun fact about our little chickadee friends, there are over 50 species of animal, that's animal, not just birds, that recognize the chickadee dee dee call as an alarm call. So there are a lot of animals that really rely on the chickadee to warn them that danger might be approaching. So most of the time when they're making that chickadee dee dee call, it's because something is like possibly agitating them. All right. Um, so definitely use those tools to also listen for the sounds. And you can count birds with sound. You don't have to see them to count them. If you hear one of these birds, you can always use the Merlin app to record the sound and see if it'll match the tones. And you can count that. And it's just like you're thinking of, if you're counting just the ones that you see, you're going to count the number that you hear. So if on one corner of your yard you hear one calling and then you hear another calling back on the other side of your yard, well, then that's two birds. You got it. They eBird doesn't love when you put like an X saying like, oh, I know they were around. Maybe there were a ton of them. But you can't always do that. You can't always put an X to say, well, I don't know how many American robins were in my yard because there were so many and I couldn't count them. You could put an X, but they like you to try to make an estimate. All right. Do y'all have any questions about better ways to identify birds? I'm not ignoring you, Trent. Well, I'm just holding off on the avian flu talk. What about lookalikes? Sarah, do you mind giving me an example of what two birds you're thinking of, or maybe some that you think, yeah, thank you. Oh, yes. See, and that's good. This is why we stare at birds for a really long time, and why you may want to upgrade from a picture book to something like a Sibley's or the Nat Geo version. Because, and I will go back to my woodpeckers, because it's going to give you more notations of what to look for. So here we have our Downy Woodpecker on this side and our hairy woodpecker on this side. So there are a couple of things that are going to help you make those decisions based on what you see in those field markings. So first, you're going to say smaller or larger than. If you say about the same size as like some sparrows, you're in the downy range. If you get a little bigger and it's maybe almost an American robin, still probably a little big for a hairy, but closer to American robin size, that's going to help you with your hairy. So if you can kind of get that scale. And then another thing, notice how cute and petite that little bill is on your Downy woodpecker, right? It's definitely smaller than the length of its head. If you go over to your hairy, its bill is going to be much longer and almost the length of its head. So really, when you have birds that are so similar, like your Downy and hairy woodpecker, you got to get into those details. These two sound a little different, but to me, not different enough that that's an easy tell. You kind of have to get nitpicky about, okay, how big of its bill, wait for a side angle, and then you can use those cues. For some other birds that might look, yeah, absolutely. Some other birds that might look alike, like, oh my gosh, all are different sparrow species. Let me flip to this page just to show you all the different types of sparrows there are out there. I call them my little brown birds, right? Look at all those little brown birds. That gets into expert territory when you start being able to just look at these at a glance and then tell the difference. But they almost all have a different sound. So that's when paying attention to what you hear becomes really important. Because again, if you go out with some birders and you hear them say, oh, it was an LBB, that means it was a little brown bird and they couldn't identify it. Yes, little brown birds are tough. Absolutely. So I will say, let me pull this up because some of the things in the chat are fleeting, but the Q&A stays. So where can you get this counting book? So this is my personal take. I try to go to local bookstores before I look anywhere else. I was able to go to my local children's bookstore where my family lives in Richmond, and they ordered it for me. Of course, this is, again, oh my goodness, we might have to put it in. Counting Birds by Heidi Stemple. Counting Birds by Heidi Stemple. I'm sure you can find it on Amazon. I just like to plug the local bookstores and help the local economy a little bit along the way. Do the backpacks have a state park pass? I don't believe they do. I do not think that is included in the backpack, but I'll show you some other stuff that's in the backpack real quick. Flashcards, which is really cool. And what's extra cool about it is that they have their map, so their home range. They have a QR code that gets you directly to the sound that bird makes. And so this actually, oh yes, it is Cornell. So if you go to allaboutbirds.com for some of your identification, they show you all these different things. They have the little icons for like habitat, what do they eat, how do you attract them to your feeder, and then what is their population status? Are they doing okay? Do they need a lot of help? So that's in the backpack. You have your Young Birders Guide, which is really cool. So it has like fun fact. Look, someone mentioned puffins earlier, right? Puffins are really cool. But they have fun facts and things that are going to be maybe more exciting for a kiddo to get to read. This identification, nest and eggs, and different tips for activities that you can do to help birds in your yard, which always fun. A ruler so you can put things to scale. Also in the backpack, this fun book, Look Up, Bird Watching in Your Own Backyard. And then, last but not least, Bird Bingo! Gotta love a bird bingo. All right, I'm going to scroll, see if I missed any more questions. Cornell lamp, yeah. So what's the latest on the avian flu in our area? Truth be told, I would have to probably look that information up. I know the Wildlife Center, I used to be much more in the loop, at least when I used to volunteer at the Wildlife Center. out of Richmond, Virginia, because then they would have cases of, mostly it would be, gosh, now I can't think of, but the mosquito, right? There's a transmission, malaria. We would have a couple of cases, maybe once a year, twice a year, of a bird that might have come through and then tested positive for like malaria or other things. And they're kind of good indicators of disease that we can be on the lookout for when they come in. But I do not know. I have not kept up with that data. Terribly sorry. Terribly sorry. But I'm sure someone somewhere on the internet does know. Like your local Audubon society probably has a report for it. All right. Any other questions that I can help you all with these last couple minutes just to get you out? There is a survey, I will say, for y'all to fill out about this program. I lead bird walks and owl prowls with the Parks and Rec, both in Culpeper and in Fauquier County. So if you want to come to something in person to get to brush up on your bird ID skills, I have beginner and intermediate sessions that you can, of course, come to. Just register for those. Look at the Culpeper Parks and Rec or the Fauquier County Parks and Rec websites, and we can get you really going with birds. I hope you all enjoy the birds and your feeder and report that data. It's great. Thank you, everybody.